When you look at the facts, that something around 1 million people perished as a result of the actions of the British and Russian and Nigerian federal governments. I don't know what one does call it, but it was pretty close to genocide.
It was the first of the genocidal wars that a great power got as close to as Britain got to the war in Biafra.
And that was totally wrong.
And that was wrong.
Over 1 million Igbos, Biafrans, all British Commonwealth citizens, died in the Nigeria-Biafra civil war. Today, more than 30 years later, questions remain. Was it genocide? Was it backed by the British government, willingly or unwillingly?
If you have part of the population, or as I say, the whole population being wiped out and murdered without any protection on these grounds, ethnic or religious or economic grounds and so on, you have genocide.
The Nigeria-Biafra civil war was also the first media famine. For the first time we saw starving children in newspapers, in magazines and on television.
Well, it was very much the sort of headline news in the papers here for a long time, and opinion was greatly divided as between those who felt that that the Igbos had a case and that Nigeria was badly governed and that it was time that something happened and that the Igbos were good people who deserved to be, and others who felt that Nigeria should remain as it was and the boundaries should remain, and if you fiddled about with the boundaries you were going to be in real difficulty, and it was a very bad precedent for other parts of Africa.
Nigeria, the richest and most populous nation in Africa. 360,000 square miles, the same size as Britain, France and Germany. 65 million people, 3 major tribes, Hausas in the north, Yorubas in the west, Igbos, Biafrans in the east. Some say the British rigged the odds against the Igbos from the beginning, from even before independence.
Of course, we also knew that the elections by 1960 had been rigged. Everybody in the know knew that we had our boys in the north, our puppets, we put them in power. They hadn't won at all. The people in the south had won, the nationalists.
Some say war was inevitable. The rest of Nigeria had always been jealous of the unity, the strength of the Igbos, the way they had managed to march together to build a better future for themselves and their children. In 1966, the world's attention was focused on Eastern Europe and the brutal Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia. The Middle East, the continuing conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, Southeast Asia, the American war in Vietnam and all its horrors. But throughout Nigeria, up to 30,000 Igbos were being attacked and brutally murdered because they were Igbos.
It's those who want us to lose the war in Vietnam. It's militants, activists, revolutionaries, anarchists, and communists. That's who it is.
To the international community, it was just another African conflict. They didn't want to get involved. There was no concern of theirs. They looked the other way. They had other things on their plate.
I would say that there is a difference between when a man belonging to a rich country dies and when a man belonging to a poor country dies. Not necessarily black man, because you can have the same problem somewhere in Asia. No, I believe that the United Nations, the international community, is still dominated by a very Europocentric attitude.
Tuesday, May 30, 1967. Enough was enough. The Igbos, alone, isolated, ignored, declared their independence. Their leader was Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu. The supreme commander and head of the military regime in Nigeria was Lieutenant Colonel Gowan. Both men had been educated and trained in Britain. The war that followed was one of the longest, bloodiest and most disastrously fought civil wars in history. In just 3 years they used more small arms ammunition than was used by British forces during the whole of the Second World War. The casualties were horrifying. The war was also unlike any other civil war in modern history. The Nigerian government, backed by the British, regularly and deliberately strafed and bombed civilian targets.
I saw 10 deliberate bombing attacks on the civilian population, either hospitals or marketplaces, and with no question of any military target being in the vicinity.
At precisely 1:30 every day, they come over the town as the marketplace is full, as patients are sitting out on the lawns at hospitals. Here comes the next one. Just above the mission now.
I looked up and I heard the explosion. The convent was still there, but then towards the school there was a cloud of smoke rising up to the sky.
The children's ward was the worst. Children's ward got a rocket right through the roof. There was a mother and child killed in bed, and another child was killed in another ward, and another child was cut in half up behind the kitchen.
Why it was deliberate, they finished an operation, and next 3 hours they come back again. So you could see that kind of thing for 3 days or 4 days.
Even more horrifying, the Nigerian government deliberately used famine as a weapon of war. The name Harold Wilson became a curse. Starvation was known as the Harold Wilson syndrome. Many people, young and old, rich and poor, went to Biafra to help the starving and the dying. One of the youngest, the most famous, the most glamorous was Princess Cecile de Bourbon-Parma, sister to one of the pretenders to the Spanish throne. She told a committee of the US Senate what she saw. On the committee was Senator Edward Kennedy.
I told him how I have been going out of the Biafra, and that one of the last nights I was with the children and the plane was not coming. And we were very anxious, and I had in my arms a little girl of, I don't know, 10 years old. And she was very anxious herself to see if the plane would come and save her. And finally we hear the motor's engine, the plane is coming. She looked at me, she smiled, and she died. And I looked at Senator Edward Kennedy, and I saw he was crying.
Biafra made aid organizations throughout the world what they are today. It enabled them to develop and perfect their emergency feeding and rescue skills that have since then saved millions of lives around the world.
It was the school of humanitarian action, Biafra, so I think it was the beginning of a new concept of wars and of the relation between humanitarian personnel, armies and the media.
Questions remain unanswered. Was it genocide? Was the bombing and strafing of civilians? Was the deliberate mass starvation of innocent men, women and children backed by the British government, willingly or unwillingly?